Hey everybody, Damon D. We're gonna do the top 10 left-handed bass players of all time. And I'm a guitar player, so I'm not claiming to be a bass player. Geezer's not on the list because he's right-handed. So you might be asking yourself, are there even 10 left-handed bass players I can think of? You probably can't because I'm left-handed and I had to really do some research to find out who they are. Let's get into the list. At number 10, Mono Neon, aka Dwayne Thomas Jr. He's really popular on YouTube. He's got a lot of great videos on YouTube, so he's kind of a YouTube star in a sense. And a fun factoid here is he is one of the last bass players to have played with Prince. Pretty awesome. He's actually right-handed, plays on a right-handed bass strung upside down as left-handed. And he says what this allows him to do is do a lot of heavy bending with his dominant hand. His slapping technique is also unique as he still performs slaps with his thumb and pops with his fingers. Number 10, Mono Neon. At number 9, Nick Feldman from Wang Chung. He's one of the founding members of English new wave band Wang Chung. Fun factoid here is he was also part of an electronic band slash project with John Moss of Culture Club. So definitely has the 80s vibe in his arsenal. Interestingly enough, Wang Chung had 6 top 40 hits in America. Who knew? I bet you know what one of them is. And Wang Chung actually kind of achieved cult status in 1985 with the soundtrack to the movie To Live and Die in LA. And you gotta give it to Mr. Feldman and Wang Chung because their song, you know, the famous line, "Everybody have fun tonight. Everybody have fun tonight. Everybody Wang Chung tonight." It became a verb. That's amazing. So when you're gonna go out with your friends and you say, "Yo, dude, what are you doing tonight?" "I don't know about you, man, but I'm gonna Wang Chung tonight." And he's also somewhat famous for playing the Steinberger L series headless bass, which was really popular mid-80s, late 80s. A lot of people played that bass. You don't really see it much anymore. So at number 9, Nick Feldman from Wang Chung. At number 8, Wayman Tisdale, who is actually a professional basketball player in the NBA with the Phoenix Suns. He released 8 jazz albums, and his 2001 release, Face to Face, reached the number 1 position on the contemporary jazz charts. Who knew? Wow. Amazing. Played 5-string basses and 4-string basses, and he was really well known in the jazz arena, along with maybe crossing over into fusion just a little bit, and that kind of, you know, Dave Koz smooth jazz vibe. So that's number 8, Wayman Tisdale, who was 6'9", by the way. At number 7, Danielle Nicole. Danielle Nicole is a blues and soul-based left-handed bass player out of Missouri in the United States of America, but she's currently recording and touring as the Danielle Nicole Band. She's known for inventive and distinctive blues bass playing and was awarded the title of Bassist of the Year at the 2022 Blues Music Awards. And this isn't the first time she's won an award like that either. She's known for playing Fender jazz basses. She cites fellow left-handed bass player Paul McCartney as a massive influence. At number 7, Danielle Nicole. At number 6, Robbie Merrill of Godsmack. So Robbie Merrill is known as the left-handed bass player of groove metal alt rockers Godsmack. You know, they've landed 7 number 1 singles on the Billboard mainstream and active rock charts. They've earned 23 top hits in active rock, the most of any act since February of 1999. So I don't know how people feel about Godsmack, but that is quite an output, and it's pretty impressive, to say the least. Interestingly enough, Robbie is actually right-handed, just like other people on the list. Due to a birth defect that left him unable to move his left-hand middle finger, his only option was to learn how to play bass left-handed. Way to go, Robbie. That was probably pretty tough to do. At number 6, Robbie Merrill of Godsmack. At number 5, Scott Reeder. He's currently the left-handed bassist in Fireball Ministry, but he's really well known for being the bass player in Caius, which I've actually seen him play in the desert, in the dust, so I know how good this guy is. And he's played with the Godfathers of the Desert Scene, Across the River, and The Obsessed. Interestingly enough, along with Jason Newsted, Devin Townsend, and Dale Crover, the Melvins, he formed a short-lived supergroup, but they never released any music. But that's a hell of a group. I wonder where those hidden tracks are. I'd like to hear that. So he plays the bass left-handed. He restrings his left-handed basses upside down, partly because when he was a kid, he played his dad's bass, his right-handed bass, upside down, so he probably just got used to it, and that's how he played it. At number 5, Scott Reeder. At number 4, Paul Gray, aka The Pig, aka number 2 of Slipknot. So he was a founding member of alt metal, nu metal giants Slipknot, who he played bass with for 15 years. Rest in peace, Paul. You did a hell of a job. In addition to being the band's bassist, he was also backing vocalist as well as one of the main songwriters. So when you're talking about influence here, Slipknot, very influential in the nu metal, hardcore metal, heavy metal genre, if you will, the theatrics and the math. So when it comes to heavy playing, Paul Gray, very influential. At number 4. At number 3, Doug Pinnick, King's X. So Doug Pinnick, left-handed bass player, best known for kind of metal, prog, alternative, rockers, King's X. The band was actually formed in 1979 and is still going, I believe, even though the members are pushing 70 years old, so that's pretty cool. So numerous bands have cited King's X, who's kind of flew under the radar, on the underground, and maybe was not as popular as they could have been, or maybe should have been. So bands such as Pantera, Pearl Jam, Smashing Pumpkins, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, and Dream Theater have all at one point or another talked about King's X as an influence. So that's a pretty cool list. Those bands are pretty popular. So Doug Pinnick actually plays his signature Schecter 12-string bass, which if you've ever seen them live, which I have, I saw them in Austin, Texas. And the unique thing is it's a trio, so he really has to fill up the sound, right? Because there's only one guitar, and Ty Tabor has a really great sound, and it's really heavy. But the bass player in a trio has to fill up the sound, and he does that pretty well with these unique sounding basses, right? This 8-string and then a 12-string, and he also lays on some distortion, so it's got this really kind of deep, punchy sound that really fills up the space. So in my book, a really unique sound. At number 3, Doug Pinnick, King's X. Number 2, Gerald Casale of Devo, obviously known as the bass player and co-vocalist of new wave rockers Devo, which actually started in 1973. And so if you want to talk about influence, this is it right here, because a lot of that new wave stuff that was happening in the late 70s started with Devo in the early 70s, and with their showmanship and unique performances. You know, I was a kid, I remember, and they were kind of in the early 80s, MTV, they got really big with Whip It and all that stuff. And the rumor at school was that those kind of red pots they had on their heads were glued to their heads and they could never take them off. I don't know, I was like, 9 or 10 or whatever. It was like Devo, and it was cool, and they're becoming big. It's like, oh, those things are glued to their heads and they're never coming off. I don't know how that started, but I was 9 or 10 and I thought, oh man, those guys are awesome. That's a pretty funny story. So he's recognized as playing these heavily customized basses. One of those is his Gibson Ripper bass with its horn sawed off. Also regularly plays the Steinberger L-Series headless bass, which another member on this list played too. Nick Feldman played that, and I believe Geddy Lee of Rush played that. So in the 80s, that kind of Steinberger headless thing was really cool. You don't see those too much around anymore, but in the 80s, that was the bass to have. So in addition to his work with Devo, and has directed numerous music videos for the likes of Cars, Rush, Foo Fighters, Soundgarden, and Silverchair. Wow, that's pretty impressive. At number 2, Gerald Casale of Devo. And at number 1, of course, Sir Paul McCartney, the most famous left-handed bass player of all time, with good reason. He was in the Beatles. That would probably do it. So along with that fame comes fortune. Mr. Paul McCartney, Sir Paul McCartney, has a net worth of $1.2 billion. Wow. And although he's kind of known as a well-rounded instrumentalist, you know, he can play piano, he plays guitar quite a bit, you know, started on bass. That's what he's kind of known for. And during the early years with the Beatles, he played his recognizable Hofner violin bass, which is closely associated with him. When you think of Paul McCartney, especially in that early 60s, mid 60s era, you definitely see that, violin style bass, very well recognized. And I think one of my favorite tracks is Taxman. I really like that bass line. You know, Paul McCartney, obviously, we don't need to spend too much time on how influential that is. Everybody knows. But if you go back and listen to some of the stuff, it's kind of like Ringo Starr. People kind of forget. They're like, you know, a lot of times you just hear, I can remember as a kid seeing the Beatles in clips and things, and it was all just like screaming girls and just screaming, and you couldn't really tell what they were actually doing until you actually put the records on, and then you go, oh, there's something happening here. Like, this is a really, I mean, you think of John Lennon, Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, George Harrison, of course, there's a reason why the Beatles were so amazing. You know, all the pop music, contemporary pop music probably starts there. And as a bass player, he really holds it down. And there's some really good bass lines there. You know, two of my favorites are Taxman and Come Together. Those are just iconic bass lines, in my opinion. So at number 1, Sir Paul McCartney. So that's the list, everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Boom. And if you're a left-handed bass player, put who you think should be on the list that's not, because I probably could have missed someone. This has been Damon D. One World, One Rock.